Hey everybody, it's Engineer Miles here, coming to you from self-exile in Denton, Texas, bringing you another fantastic episode of America's leading podcast, Low Profile with Mark Lee Morrison. Today on the show, we feature an interview with Michael Corcoran, who wrote a fantastic book about Washington Phillips, along with a CD of his completed recordings. If you haven't done so already, it would really help us out if you could rate and review us on iTunes and smash the 5 stars on there. And if you're able to, contribute to the Patreon. That would be a really nice way to help keep the show going. If you don't have the means right now, don't worry about it. Just enjoy the show and don't worry about it. Anyways, I love you all. I hope you're staying safe. I hope you're staying healthy. And I hope you're staying indoors as much as possible. Now, on to the show.
We must love for Jesus to care for us. 'Cause you ought to know in Him He is our only trust. Whatever we desire, whenever we do pray, we must have the faith and believe that He will do just what He said. Oh, Paul and Silas in the Philippian jail, they was both bound. 'Cause you're in Jesus, they found Him close around.
Washington Phillips was a little-known gospel singer and jackleg preacher in the early 20th century. He recorded 18 songs for Columbia Records between 1927 and 1929 when he was just shy of 50 years old. The instrument you can hear him playing here is an invention which he called a manzarine. He was said to have died in an insane asylum in 1937, but more recent research by a man named Michael Corcoran has since debunked that theory and other mysteries about this man in his 100-page book and CD, Washington Phillips and His Manzarine Dreams. Today we're going to be speaking with Michael about his excursions on his quest for the truth about this obscure gospel blues musician from Texas. Michael, thank you for joining us on Low Profile. Can you tell our listeners where you are calling from?
I'm in Austin, Texas.
You're in Austin.
Right. I've been here since about 1984. I moved away a little bit, but I'm mostly based in Austin.
And what brought you to Austin?
I was from Honolulu, and I had a biker T-shirt business with a tattoo artist, and we had a lot of business. And every time, you can't really put stuff on a bulk mail from Hawaii. You have to send everything first class.
Sure.
This is a long story, but so we wanted to go someplace in the middle of the country so we could just send the T-shirts out bulk mail and save us a lot of money on postage. So we just picked Austin. I had a friend who was she was married to one of the Cramps, Brian Gregory.
Oh, wow.
And she sent me a postcard from Austin and saying, "You can't believe this. This is Texas, but it doesn't feel like Texas." And it was a picture of Lux Interior in the crowd, and she wrote it on the back. And then so I had that, and then my partner, Rollo, the tattoo artist, he got a newsletter from a group called the Dallas County Jug Band with a guy named Travis, I can't remember his last name right now, but they were based in Austin too. So we just took that as an omen that's where we should move to.
Let's fast forward. So it was about 18 years later, you were working on research on Washington Phillips.
Yeah, I started working on him in 2002.
And that was for the Texas Statesman?
The Austin American Statesman.
Oh, right.
Yeah, what happened was I got the Yazoo CD, and it had in the liner notes it said that he had died in Austin. I loved his music already, but when you work for the Austin American Statesman, you can't really write a big story about a guy from East Texas. It has to be an Austin connection. So when I saw that he died in Austin, that was what I needed to start working on the story.
And it turned out
I spent about a week
Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, yeah. So it turned out he didn't die in Austin. That's one thing.
Right. I spent about a week researching the wrong guy, and I had a lot of good information. I found out, that he went crazy in East Texas, and he was committed by his brother, and it was kind of a family dispute over the land and that sort of thing. But then I was interviewing people from Teague and Simsboro, and they would tell me about Washington Phillips, and I said, no, they would say, you mean my cousin Washington Phillips, you mean my other cousin. He's the one that played music. And I said, no, the one that's married to Electra. And they go, no, he didn't play music. My other cousin did. And I was like thinking, well, maybe they're confused. But it turns out that the same name, George Washington Phillips, there's two cousins by the same name. And the guy who did the liner notes for the first Washington Phillips thing was a guy from Europe. He didn't really have the access that I did. And so I just drove up to Teague, Texas, and started interviewing people. And after about 3 or 4 trips, I kind of put everything together that it was a different Washington Phillips, that the one that played the music was, I think he was 11 years older than the one who died in Austin. And I just kept on the trail every time I'd find something new, and kind of pieced everything together. I also found out that he didn't play Dulciolo, which is the other big myth about him.
Yeah, that's the other big mystery you solved.
Yeah, because I interviewed this one guy, Virgil Keaton, and he said, well, yeah, Washington Phillips played at our wedding. And I said, what year did you get married? He said, 1943. And I go, well, he died in 1938. He couldn't have played the wedding. And I go, no, he played the wedding. And then I drove up there and talked to Virgil, and I said, well, what did it look like when he played? And he did the plucking. He showed me the plucking thing, motion.
Right.
And I said, it wasn't a keyboard? He said, it wasn't a keyboard? He said, no, it was like the strings from a piano, but he strummed them. And I talked to 3 or 4 other people. They said the same thing, that he played like a guitar, but a weird guitar. It's what he made himself.
Right.
And so that's the thing about music history a lot of times, is that someone will say one thing and it gets passed on as fact.
Right. It's
and
like
people just believe it. After 20 people say it, they figure that must be a fact. It's like I did another one of my subjects. I did was Arizona Drains. Pentecostal piano player from 1920s. Say my 1920s black gospel musicians is kind of my area of expertise.
Sure.
And so they said that she was half Mexican because she went by Arizona Juanita Drains. Juanita was her middle name. But that was the only proof that anybody had, that she was half Mexican. And you'll see every history that was written about her was that she was half Mexican. And Juanita was a very popular name for black females.
Right.
And in fact, the church mother of the church she was in Fort Worth was named Juanita. And, in Texas, there's a thing where they use the first initial and middle initial. And so she didn't have a middle name, so she took Juanita so she could be A.J. Drains. And that's what it was. That's the whole thing. And then everybody just repeated this misinformation. And I don't know. I think
that's kind of like
a lot of times.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that reminds me kind of like of L.V. Thomas. Everybody thought her name was spelled L.V., like E-L-V-I-E, but it was actually the initials L.V.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, it's like that. Everything I've worked on is like that. I did a lot of research on Blind Willie Johnson, too. Mm-hmm. And they had the wrong birth date, the wrong birth year, or death year, the wrong place of birth. And see, this was all his wife at the time when he died. She was the informant on the death certificate, and she was given information about her own life. She probably got confused, and she thought they were asking where she was from, and she told them they were asking where he was from, and she said where she was from. And so it's just like that all the time. You have to really check with 4 or 5 sources on each fact and get a consensus, because they're kind of all over the place.
Right.
Yeah. So how did you come to be such a historian on Texas music?
Well, I started out, being a music critic, a rock critic. And really, my idols were Lester Bangs and the Cream magazine people,
Right.
And I was really more of that acerbic rock critic because I didn't really know anything. I wanted, my goal has always been the same, which is to be interesting. But when I was younger, I didn't know anything, so my way to be interesting was to be provocative, to be kind of a jerk.
Yeah, be a provocateur.
Just kind of like, getting people's faces. I love the idea that you can't be proven wrong. Your opinion can't be proven wrong.
Sure.
And so I would have these really dumb opinions. I would be out there. A lot of times I didn't even believe them. I would just kind of come off the wall. And I remember one thing I wrote. It was about Charlie Parker. And I knew what I was saying was wrong, but I still thought it was funny. I said, I don't know about this guy. It sounds to me like he's just making this stuff up as he goes along. And I put that in the review, and of course I got all these people, writing, what, this guy doesn't know anything about. And to me, it was all fine. I didn't care that people thought I was an idiot. To me, it was entertaining.
Right.
Yeah.
But then about 1996, the turning point for me was I did a story from there was a guy named Kirk Franklin, gospel performer in Fort Worth, kind of a big star, not a big talent, but a big star. And he had a #1 record with this community choir in Dallas called God's Property.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, they sampled One Nation Under a Groove, and they had a big hit, and they had a rap break. And so I drove to Dallas and did the story on them, but I wanted more background on gospel music. At that point, I knew I loved gospel music, but I didn't know anything about it. So I got a couple of gospel history books, and that's when I first heard about Arizona Drains and Blind Willie Johnson and Washington Phillips. I heard about them. I knew that they were important people. They were from Texas, and why wasn't the Arizona Drains more prominent? Because they said that she invented the gospel beat, and that's, to me, the gospel beat. That's rock and roll.
Right.
So she's really the first person that ever played secular music with religious lyrics.
And why wasn't
and that's
she?
To me, it's gospel.
Why wasn't she Texas Graves?
Why wasn't she what?
Why wasn't her first name Texas?
Why was it Arizona? Yes.
I don't know. Yeah, that's just a naming thing.
Yeah.
They called her Arizona. Arizona, like with the rhyme with macaroni.
Oh yeah.
Oh, nice.
So it's just a thing. And the other thing too is that even though her name is Drains, is written as Drains, her real name is probably Duran, Doran. And her parents were illiterate, so when they, the way you pronounce Duran is Drain.
Right.
In the black dialect. So
right.
She's probably a Duran because she went to live with a woman named L.V. Duran in Wichita Falls. And so you can't prove that, though. There's a lot of things that you just have to go with your hunch on. A lot of things can't be proven. I mean, even stuff with like Blind Willie Johnson. You don't know if there could have been another guy named Willie Johnson who was blind who was a musician. There could have been 3 or 4 running around.
Right.
Sure.
Because there's evidence that he's been married, like Blind Willie Johnson's been married like 5 or 6 times,
Right.
Often with two or three women at the same time, but you never know. Also could be a guy, maybe it's a blind guy who's talented with a guitar. He calls himself Blind Willie Johnson because he wants everybody to think he's the famous one.
Right.
So that's, there's always a chance that you could be wrong about something, which is why I really stick to the research so heavily, because I don't want to be wrong.
Right.
I want to be as accurate as possible. And they had a New York Times recently, not that recently, but there's a guy named John Jeremiah Sullivan,
Right.
who wrote this really great piece on L.V. Thomas and Mac McCormick. And it was the anniversary of the Geeshy Wiley. And there was that Voyager that went off in 1977. It was the anniversary of the Voyager, which has Blind Willie Johnson's music on it.
Yeah.
And so the New York Times sent him to Temple to do a big Blind Willie Johnson story. And I was a little worried, like, oh man, he's going to get something I didn't have. He's going to find all this stuff. This guy's a great writer. He's got all this time. He's got the New York Times resources behind him.
Yep.
He ended up going back and not writing the story because there was nothing left.
Right.
Like the way I want it to be is like if you come to Texas and you do research on one of the people I've done research for, it's like going to a garage sale at noon. It's already been picked over.
Yep.
You're not going to find anything good. And so, but in that case, I was a little bit worried. But I had that sort of obsession that on those three artists, I know we were supposed to talk about, mainly about Washington Phillips, but
No.
they all kind of three go together.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like I figure that I did the primary research on all three of them. I was the first one that really did anything that was real factual on all of them. So I have this responsibility to see it through.
Yeah.
To me, they're sort of like, I don't want anybody to find out anything that I didn't. Like, that just shows that I didn't do my job all the way.
Right.
So you did the research for the publication back in 2002, and then Dust to Digital comes along, and they talk you into writing a book, or did you already have some of this already happening? Did you just expand on your old research, or?
What happened was the very first product that Dust to Digital put out was called I can't remember the name now. It was a big Babylon. Had Babylon in the title. I can't remember. I'm bad with names at this point in titles. But their very first release was great. It was in a wooden box.
Yeah,
it was a 6 CD set.
God, I know exactly what you're talking about. My friend John used to have it. It's a great compilation.
And they had Washington Phillips in that, and they referred to my research in their little blurb on Washington Phillips. And so about 2013, Lance Ledbetter from Dust to Digital, he gets a hold of me. He says, if you want to write the liner notes for this Washington Phillips thing we want to do, we want to have like real extensive liner notes. And I said, sure. And he said, well, how much do you want? And I quoted him a really small amount because I thought I would just take what I had already written and just send it to them, and they put it in a book, and that's it. I wouldn't have to do any new stuff,
Right.
But of course, it doesn't work out that way. You get, sometimes obsession is the talent, And
right.
I think in this case, I had one more chance to do Washington Phillips, and I ended up spending like way too much time on it. And I wrote it in 2014, and it didn't come out for 2 years. I sent it in. I had to wait around for 2 years, but I knew it was really good. I knew I had a lot of stuff that nobody'd ever had before. And it was a 77-page booklet, and before that, there was maybe one page of stuff that people knew about Washington Phillips.
Right. No,
but
it was.
I'll tell you one story that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I wanted to hear
that.
Like
I went to, there was a guy named Wardell Phillips. He's the next of kin for Washington Phillips. He owns the farm that Washington Phillips lived at. His father was Washington Phillips' best friend, and he sort of inherited the farm. And so I went there. I was going to interview Wardell Phillips, and he also had the family history all written down. And so I drive to Teague, about 2.5 hours, and I go to his house, and he goes, well, I talked to my, I think it was his nephew, and his nephew talked to a lawyer, and they said I shouldn't do the interview because, why would I do that? I'm not getting any money for this, and we just don't want to do the interview. And I said, well, and I'm trying to get him I said, well, I just drove all the way out here. He goes, I'm sorry, I can't do the interview. And so I drove back to Austin, empty-handed, and I got a speeding ticket, $180 ticket.
Oh my gosh!
I thought, oh God, what the hell? So I said, well, I got to get something good out of this day. And so there's a library in Austin called the Texas State Library, and I said, I'm going to go there and I'm going to find something about Washington Phillips because I don't want this whole day to be a washout, And that's the day I found that clipping from 1907. That is really the most important bit of information on Washington Phillips.
Yeah, where
it talked about
his manzarine.
This is 20 years, 1907. Yeah, this is 20 years. This is 20 years before. Oh shoot, I got a call coming. Hold on.
Okay. I'm gonna read that little bit of paper while you do that.
Okay.
This comes from the Teague Chronicle from November 8th, 1907. Washington Phillips would have been 27 at the time, and I'm going to do a slight paraphrase of the article. A unique instrument. There is a gentleman in town named George Washington Phillips, who has manufactured one of the most unique musical instruments we ever saw. It is a box about 2 by 3 feet, 6 inches deep, in which he has strung violin strings, something on the order of an autoharp. He is as black as the ace of spades, but the music he gets out of that roughly made box is certainly surprising. He uses both hands and plays all sorts of airs. He calls it a manzarine. The tricks which nature plays are stranger than fiction.
It just proved that Dulceola, it showed that 20 years before Washington Phillips ever stepped into a studio, he was already being written about in his hometown newspaper. So he already had the talent,
Right.
And so everybody thought that when he went to the studio for the first time, he was like 34, 35. He was actually 47, and
Right.
he'd been good for at least 25 years.
Yeah.
So he was like, you can imagine all that incredible music by Washington Phillips was one guy with a microphone holding those two zithers, Frankenstein together, and one take.
Yeah.
Everything he did was one take.
Yep.
Yeah, only in December.
It's amazing. One microphone, it's just amazing he was able to do that. And I always think that the guy, Frank B. Walker, the guy who recorded him, he recorded Washington Phillips one day, Blind Willie Johnson the next day.
Incredible.
He must have thought, what the heck is going on here in
Yeah.
Texas,
Yeah.
Like that's
Because those are two unbelievable talents, and they did it all with one microphone.
Yeah, I can imagine what was going through his head that weekend, boy. Yeah, that's...
He is the guy, but Frank Walker is the guy who discovered Bessie Smith, though. So
Right.
he had been around greatness. And he also discovered Hank Williams later on.
Right.
So he's a major talent. I love when I find out about people like Frankie Walker that should be better known that aren't. Like everybody knows about Ralph Peer, and there's been books written about him, but Frankie Walker, to me, is just as great as Ralph Peer, just as important in the whole music field.
Yeah,
He recorded Body and Soul by Coleman Hawkins, Take the A Train by Duke Ellington.
Right.
Just an incredible guy, but because he didn't really, court the limelight, and also all his papers were destroyed through who knows why, but he doesn't have any papers to go through. So that's why nobody really knew anything about him. But I just thought what he did in Dallas, those 3 sessions in December, was pretty amazing stuff.
Yeah, December of 27, 28, and 29. And,
Yeah.
All in Deep Ellum, yeah.
Yeah, and they did it in December too because it's so hot in Texas that they recorded right into the album, the lacquer,
Right.
That
And
makes sense.
It would melt. It would melt during the summer.
That's
So
that's interesting. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. Wow. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
yeah, and what he would do is he'd audition in the morning, they rehearse in the afternoon, and they record at night. And so of the 20 or so acts that he recorded in Dallas, probably 60 or 70 tried out for it. And so there was a lot of people that really wanted to make a record because to them that was the greatest thing that could happen in their life is to make a record.
Yeah. Yeah, you mentioned, like payment was almost kind of secondary, it was like more important just to be recorded.
Yeah.
Yeah, they never got any money. And it's a shame too because Blind Willie Johnson's family still hasn't received a penny.
Really?
Wow.
And when you think about the first day that he ever stepped into a studio, he recorded 5 songs that are classics now.
Yeah.
Nobody's Fault But Mine that Led Zeppelin did.
Mm-hmm.
Samson and Delilah,
Yep.
Grateful Dead did. He called it If I Had My Way. Jesus Make My Dying Day, which Bob Dylan called In My Time of Dying.
Yeah.
Also recorded by Led Zeppelin. Um, Dark Was the Night, Cold Was the Ground.
Which is on the
Instrumental
Voyager
that's been
record.
Yeah. And it's also like Paris, Texas. Ry Cooder, based his whole soundtrack to Paris, Texas on that one song. So this is all in one day, and they haven't received a penny.
Wow.
Because the thing is, though, the record labels, they're not going to look for you and say, hey, are you related to Blind Willie Johnson? Here's a check for $114,000.
Right.
You have to make an estate. You have to establish the estate. You have to go do the due diligence and find out all the relatives, all the ancestors. And with Blind Willie Johnson, they just never could do that. Who knows how many kids he's got?
Right.
It was too hard to find that stuff.
Yeah, and
I interviewed his daughter, that proven daughter, who's on her birth certificate said the father was Willie Johnson, a musician from Temple, Texas.
Oh wow,
so that was definitely his daughter.
That's very specific. That's good.
Yeah, I interviewed her in 2003, and she was living in a house, the same house that she was conceived in, 1700 Street in Marlin, Texas. The roof was caved in. There was only one room that they could actually sit in without worry of the roof falling in on them.
Oh man,
it was the worst shack you'd ever seen. She was a 72-year-old woman with her ankles were so swollen, and she was trying to work out with Steve Levesque. Steve Levesque, the guy who was Robert Johnson's estate guy. He got all the money for Robert Johnson's family, and so his deal was 50-50. So he got 50% of whatever money he collected, and she was going to sign with him. He flew to Marlin, went and visited with her, and same thing, she decided not to, and that cost her a lot of money because, say with Robert Johnson, I think at the time he had collected about $20 million.
Wow!
So the family got $10 million for Robert Johnson's money, and so even though he got $10 million too, you can't think like that. You have to think, I need to get something for my family.
Right.
Yeah.
But she passed away before anything could really happen, which is sad.
Yeah, sure is.
I was wondering if you could recount the story of when you found out that Washington Phillips was a snuff user, and how you found that out.
Well, I tracked down this woman named Annie Fluellen. Annie Fluellen, and she was related to both Washington Phillips, the one who died in Austin, and the one who was a musician. And she was telling me, I talked to her on the phone, she was in California, and she had this funny story about how when she was a little girl, she kept bugging Washington Phillips about his snuff. Let me try that. And so he gave her a little pinch of it just to show her how, dangerous it was, whatever. And so she said she took it in her nose a little bit, and she said she passed out cold from the snuff. So I thought the whole time she's talking about the other one. I said she's got to be talking about the other one, not the Bible thumper. But then when I went to when I was working on the story, I was very lucky to meet this guy named Durden Dixon. And Durden Dixon he lived next door to Washington Phillips in Simsboro. And then since then, though, he moved to a trailer kind of on the outskirts of town. And I just went and started knocking on doors, in the black neighborhood. And he was there. Oh yeah, I knew Mr. Wash. I knew Mr. Wash. So I said, could you show me where his farm used to be? Sure. So he gets in the car, and we're driving there, and I'm playing Washington Phillips CD in the car. It is the eyes light up like, oh my God, that's him.
Wow.
Nobody there had any idea. Nobody knew that he made records, and even the people next door, none of the people in Simsboro knew he made records. So we go to he shows me where his house used to be. He had a little cabin there. He said, yeah, this is where it used to be. And I'm looking around. There's all these like rusted buckets and kind of a bed spring and kind of trash here and there. And I looked and there's like half buried. There's like a little glass thing, a little glass bottle. And I picked it up and I emptied the dirt from it. And then Durden says, that's a snuff bottle, man. I go, what? He goes, yeah, that's a snuff bottle. And so I'm still thinking, like, I don't know if this is for real. So I took it to an antique store the next day in Austin. And they said, yeah, that was a Garrett snuff bottle from 1950s, early 50s.
Wow. And
so Washington Phillips died in 54, so that was the snuff bottle.
Wow.
Do you still have the snuff bottle?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Here's something funny, too. Well, not that funny, but the guy Josh Pearson from Live to Experience.
I know
band
about
from
them.
Denton, Texas.
Yeah, they're great.
So he came to my book signing, and I did a book signing in T after the book came out, and it was a really magical book signing. All the Lance wanted me to record some of the people that were relatives of, or not relatives, neighbors of Washington Phillips, and get their memories and that sort of thing. And so I went around with an iPhone and got some people to tell stories. And and Josh Pearson, he came up from Mahia, which is not too far, maybe an hour away. He came to the book signing, and his friend Justin Joseph. And afterwards, I said, I'll show you the farm where Wash Phillips used to live. And Durden Dixon took us over there again, because I forgot where it was. And we're looking around and stuff, and Josh Pearson found a snuff bottle, too.
Wow.
Same kind. He found a brown snuff bottle. So
wow.
Must have fallen off the cart.
Not one of a kind.
Yeah.
Yeah, it must have been. I don't know. He was looking around, and we found his well, too, and I don't know. It seems like every time I went there would be something else I'd find that would be really cool.
I wonder if that's, there's not much besides the recordings that survive from Washington Phillips. I wonder, like what happened to the Manzarine? You've got the snuff bottles at least, though,
Yeah, we got the snuff bottles, and also the church where he was a preacher. Like when he first started off, he was a jackleg preacher, which meant he wasn't ordained, and he would go to whatever church would have him, and he would spend all his time on his little mule cart going around every Sunday, going to every church waiting to preach, which is really why a lot of his songs were kind of about how preachers, the ordained preachers, were really not holy, man. They were kind of phonies.
Yeah.
He had a lot of songs like that because he thought he was a religious guy. He had the real spirit inside him, and these other people just went to college and they thought they were cool, but they really weren't.
They're educated fools.
So, yeah, that's right. But at the very end, though, he became a reverend at this church called the Trinity Mission. What's it called? Missionary Baptist Church. I can't remember his first. Trinity Missionary Baptist Church. Maybe that's what it was.
Yeah.
And
Pleasant Hill.
Anyway, so I went there and I saw I was there with the preacher was there, and I said, "Well, do you have any old stuff here, whatever from the old days?" He goes back. He brings out this box and had all these like prayer books and hymnals, and they had Washington Phillips' signature on there, and he also had all these notations about what he sang at the services, and like he married Washington Phillips' third wife was the choir director from the church, and so there was some remnants of that too. And then I found the picture that is kind of famous now, but the picture of him with the two mules.
Yeah.
That was a woman named Doris Foreman Neely, and as I said, I was knocking on doors, that sort of thing, and people would tell me, "You need to talk to Doris Foreman Neely. She lived next door or her family lived next door to Wash Phillips." And I went over there and talked to her for a while, and she goes, "Well, hold on a second." And she goes, "Yeah, I got a picture of him," and I'm like, kind of hopeful, but not thinking anything's going to happen. And she shows me that picture, and I'm like, "Oh my God!"
Yeah.
There's only been one picture of him before that,
right? Yeah. And it's much later too. So, he's a bit older.
Yeah, that picture was like early 50s. Yeah, that picture was early 50s, and a lot of people at first didn't think it was the same person, but then someone did an analysis where they checked the bone structure and said it definitely was. The right one.
Wow.
I mean, there's a guy named Gary Harrison and Michael. Somebody, I can't remember his name right now, but they did a lot of research on the instrumentation of Washington Phillips, and there's some really good stuff online that goes into really strong detail about exactly what he played, and I think it's called fretlesshithers.com. Is the name of the website.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I've heard that before. Doing a little bit of research.
They sort of like. I'm not a musician, so I didn't know a lot of the terms. So it's good that musicians came up and did that, because when I first started doing the story, there was only 40 known Dulciola owners in the whole world.
Right.
So they were all into the idea that Washington Phillips played the Dulciola. But anyway, a guy from Memphis named Andy Cohen said, if it went for Washington Phillips, nobody even care about the Dulciola. He's the only reason anybody cares.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
So,
yeah.
Yeah, and so it was weird too because I called Andy Cohen when I first found out that it was a zither, not a dulciola he played, and he didn't. And he owns a dulciola. He was actually kind of interested. He wasn't like going, "Oh, that's bullshit" or anything like that. He was like, he would go, "Wow, that's great." You know, he was really encouraging, and so that's kind of cool.
It's interesting too because listening to his music, you can hear, as a musician, that he's plucking. He's not hammering the strings. So it's interesting that myth, was the fact for so long.
It all started with Paul Oliver. He had a book called Screaming the Blues, I think, or Screaming the Blues, something like that. And on the notes from one of the sessions, it said he played a dulciola, like D-U-L-D-U-C.
Like dolce, like sweet?
Like a dulcimer.
I think they were trying to say what do you call it? Dulcimer.
Yeah, like a dulcimer.
Yeah, dulcimer's an instrument that you pluck.
Mm-hmm.
But Paul Albert thought they meant dulciola, so he kind of started that whole idea that that's what it was. And then the guy from the Netherlands who read all this really scholarly reporting on Washington Phillips, he came and ran with the dulciola thing, and it became fact after that. But in Ry Cooder, when he made I think it was Paris, Texas album, he used the dulciola to try to recreate the Washington Phillips sound. And it does sound like, the dulciola is really, it's a zither, but it's keyboard activated. They do sound similar.
Right.
But like you said, you don't hear the plucking sound, though, with the dulciola. You hear a hammering sound.
Yeah, and it seems like you can't be, Washington Phillips is very virtuosic on those strings, he's doing these arpeggios and real runs.
He spent a lot of time working on that.
Yeah, it seems like he'd have, it would be difficult to recreate that with the keys, maybe. I don't know, but I've never played a dulciola, but...
he had his own tuning. He put these two zithers together, and we're not sure if he even had a box. A lot of the people I talked to said it was in a box. And so he might have had like a little something that he kept the zithers in to have a more resonating sound.
Right.
And then when he did the picture of him when he's holding up the zithers, maybe he was just showing him what he might have taken them out, but.
Or he might have
definitely didn't play a dulciola, though.
He had like 20 years or something, so he might have also been doing different iterations of his manzarine,
Sure, he could have evolved it. I wonder if he made more than one.
Well, I think he made his first one. I think he made it out of piano wires, and then later on he found out that there was an instrument that's already made called a zither, and he got a couple of those. I think early on, though, just like the way that a lot of blues musicians, they started off playing a wire from a screen door,
sure,
and then they end up getting a guitar. I think early on he made his instrument early on, and then later on he got a real zither, because I think the fretlesszithers.com they actually know exactly what he played.
Yeah, the exact model.
Phone was one of them. Yeah, but the Frank B. Walker, though, he said that Washington Phillips played an instrument he made himself. So I think it could have been that the way he put those two zithers together was really unique.
Right.
Nobody ever seen anything like that before.
Yeah, or since, really.
Yeah, and there was some things I left out of the book that was interesting. I might have put it, I'm not sure, but
an exclusive.
He had all sorts of tricks. Washington Phillips had all sorts of tricks, and all the kids thought he was like the boogeyman, because what he would do is he'd eat a fish. He'd cook a fish and eat it like a sandwich. And then he'd spit the bones out of the side of his mouth.
Yeah, I was wondering
He had all
about
these little tricks. He had all these little tricks for the kids, and he was a very, very beloved guy in the community. But everybody thought he was really weird. He sold liniment oil and that sort of thing.
Hey y'all, Mark Lee here, just butting in post. So speaking of Washington Phillips being a weird guy, There's a story firsthand that Michael sent me a recording of graciously. So this is a low-profile exclusive of a woman named Mary Ford, who was a little girl who lived in the same neighborhood as Wash Phillips toward the end of his life. And she shared some anecdotes about it. And just so you know, female mules are called jennies. All right, here we go.
I know that whole round world do not love me no how, and it is on the count of sin.
Until Michael started writing, none of us had any idea that records was cut or anything. We knew he made this instrument, and because of our lack of knowledge, we called it a guitar because it had strings and a box. One thing we knew about him, he was not a handsome person, and we kids would sniggle. But we loved him because he was a gentle person. And as the lady said a while ago, he could take those jennies, and wherever he headed, he did not have to guide them. He would play that music, and them jennies would take him wherever he wanted to go. And we kids would run behind him, and he never looked back, but he'd tell y'all behave. We respected him. My connection with him is I love those jennies, and I played with him. He would come to the 19th of June, at that time where we colored folks would meet at Pleasant Hill, have ice cream, and he would play. And as you said, we would dance around and jump around with Mr. Watson's music. And I'd go back and play with his jennies. And he'd tell me when he died, I could have his jennies. And when I heard he died, I took out across the field, I was going to get my jennies. And I cried for 3 days because Miss Dupree sold my jennies. I asked my dad to go find Mr. Washington's jennies because them jennies was mine. And we never knew what happened to him. But for your information, in our community, we had no idea that he had cut records. All we knew was he played and that he was a praying man. I tell this and I sit down. My daddy said he went to Lubbock, Texas, and being colored, he would walk in the street and 2 police officers decided to arrest him for what you call a vagrancy. They said one got on one side, one got on the other side. Said Mr. Wash fell on his knees and went to praying, and when he opened his eyes, they were gone. So that let you know he had a spirit connection. His music ability came, whether you want to admit or not, he was anointed with the Holy Spirit that taught him how to play and gave him that gift of music. But in Silverberg, we loved him as Mr. Wash. We didn't know about no Wash Phillips or no musician. He was just Mr. Wash that drove the jennies, and we kids played with him and thought he was a boogeyman.
Then you will rightly treat your neighbor, and it won't be hard for you to do.
I just think it's so
cool.
remarkable that you got to meet some people that knew him for this release event, and so many of them had never even heard the recordings, or much less knew about them.
When I started, nobody had ever heard of it, because he made the recordings in 1927. They were all born in the 40s and 50s.
Yeah,
they knew him as kids, maybe as teenagers, but they didn't know him as a recording artist. And he didn't go around telling everybody, "Hey, I made a few records."
He was not a braggart.
And those records were probably hard to come by. I mean, they only made a few thousand copies, it seems like, or maybe 10,000, something like that.
Yeah, at the most. He was his first record sold the best because he had this really unique sound, but also too, like 1929 when the Depression hit, the stock market crashed. That pretty much ended country blues, gospel. The primitive recording industry was over at that point.
Right. Like
because
a lot of artists.
In the 30s. Well, what happened was radio started commercial radio started in 1920 in Pittsburgh, and it sort of slowly grew. And then when the Depression hit, then all of a sudden radio was the thing, and because you couldn't afford records,
right?
And so people listened to the radio, and radio was all about pop music. It was all about maybe jazz, a little bit of jazz, but they weren't into. It was more escapism stuff, and
Sure.
so all the real stuff was not popular at all. And then Robert Johnson comes along in 1936, around the time that the Depression's winding up, and that became it kind of started all over again.
Right. It's interesting how in good times people seem to be more amenable to maybe more raw or real type of subject matter.
Yeah.
But as soon as things turn south, they want escapism.
They want everything sugar coated.
Yeah.
Which
Right.
I feel like that's about where the radio's at these days as well. As of late.
Yeah, who listens to the radio anymore though?
Right. Yeah.
But it's like I have a new book coming out called Ghost Notes. It's coming out next month.
Great title.
And I have a few chapters on the Lomax family, John Lomax and Alan Lomax.
Mm-hmm.
And for our listeners, those were early field recorders, ethnomusicologists who...
Yeah. I mean, really, John Lomax is kind of like the father of American musicology.
Right.
He found, in 1910, he found Home on the Range, Streets of Laredo.
Oh, wow.
Get Long Little Dogies, the Chisholm Trail.
Oh, yeah.
This was all... In 1910, he was the first one to have all these cowboy songs published. But he didn't really become all that prominent until the 30s, when he was in the 60s. He was 65 years old when he started again. And his son was 19, and his son Alan really took over. But their big fear, the reason they went to penitentiaries to record, like Lead Belly and people like that, is because prisoners did not have access to the radio, and they didn't have access to records. They didn't know about jazz. He wanted to go to where people still were singing folk songs as a way to entertain themselves, because the rest of the country was crazy about the radio.
Right.
Yeah.
So you have your first sort of homogenization or monoculture of music. He was trying to get back to the source of American music tradition.
Yeah, well, when you think about all the songs he had saved, like House of the Rising Sun, Sloop John B., Frankie and Johnny, a lot of these songs might have been lost forever if it went for the Lomaxes.
Right.
Wow.
They recorded them and archived them at the Library of Congress. And for instance, Goodnight Irene, Lead Belly played it for them when he was still a prisoner in I think 1933, and they archived the recording with the it's the Archive of American Folk Song, I think it's called. It was part of the Library of Congress. And then later on, like 13 years later, or 17 years later, the Weavers recorded Goodnight Irene, and that's really what started the folk revival in America in 1950. It was the number one song, and to think that this song was sung by a prisoner on a 12-string guitar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then next thing you know, everybody in the whole country singing it.
Yep.
Talk about being in the right place at the right time.
Yeah. Well, those guys were, that's getting back to the whole obsession thing. The Lomaxes were totally obsessed with getting this material. They knew it was out there, and if they didn't get it, it might fade away. It might be gone forever.
So there's two Washington Phillips tracks that never got recorded, or they got recorded and they were never released, or
right.
They haven't been found. Yeah, the world is in a bad fix everywhere.
How far?
Part 2.
I want to know how far your obsession took you with that particular recording.
I went to New York City, and I went to Sony, who claims that they own the Washington Phillips masters. They don't have any masters. I mean, the Washington Phillips records, the Blind Willie Johnson, Arizona Dreams, they're all taken from 78s.
Yeah, from collectors.
Yeah, from collectors. And so they claim to own the material. Maybe they do, but Columbia's been sold 3 or 4 times since the recordings, and I don't think that they didn't pay any money for them.
Right.
I don't know how they could claim copyrights, but anyway, I figured out that the other song that was never released was you can't. It was, they call it later Tattler.
Oh yeah, You Can't Stop a Tattler. Yeah.
You can't stop a tattler, and ain't no use in you trying. Just as long as this world lasts, they're gonna find somebody lying. Oh, deliver me from a woman or either man. You know now it's all the go that will go about from house to house and tell everything that they know.
Yeah, Tattler's the way that Linda Ronstadt recorded it. She called it Tattler, but this Washington Phillips has got a song on an album that sold like 3 million copies by Linda Ronstadt. Never received a penny.
Yeah.
But I think I figured out later on that that Tattler and The World's in a Bad Fix were never released because they weren't gospel songs.
Wow.
You know, Tattler's more of a moralistic marriage, song.
Yeah.
World's in a Bad Fix is more of a commentary.
Yeah.
Back then, you did gospel or you did secular. You didn't do both.
Right.
No crossovers.
Yeah.
And also, too, like 1929, nobody cared about Washington Phillips in 1929. All that music. The only one of those 3 that I'm obsessed with that really was popular into the 30s was Blind Willie Johnson.
Right.
And he sort of faded after 1930.
Wow.
So, on the songs, you said that it's a comment. I've heard little bits, but yeah, has anybody found anything else about these, like lyrics or? Yeah, I guess you know the title is very suggestive, but.
Well, I have I have copies of the recording cards,
which you put in the book too. For our listeners,
yeah.
You should definitely buy this reissue of Washington Phillips' music.
It's really great.
It's full of ephemera. Besides the 77 pages of liner notes, there's lots of photos and scanned documents and news clippings. It's just such a tremendous.
The remaster is incredibly remastered by I can't remember the guy's name right now. I'm sorry, I'm so bad with names, but
oh, that's fine.
I'm 64 years old. It's like the first thing that goes.
Yep.
I go to book signings. With people I've known for 30 years. I have to ask them what their name was. It's really embarrassing.
It's the way it goes.
I finally have it worked out. So I have someone that writes their name down ahead of me, and they hand me the card, and they're like, "Oh, Betsy, how you doing?" But I couldn't tell you Betsy's name if she came up to me.
I got it here. Michael Graves did the mastering.
Yeah, Michael Graves.
Yeah.
From New Braunfels, Texas. He's been nominated for like 4 or 5 Grammys. He's one of the best.
Yeah, it's.
But you listen to the Dust and Digital versions of those songs. It's so crisp.
Yeah.
Compared to the Yazoo.
Yeah, and the signal noise and all the pops and hisses are like it's the best versions of those songs out there, bar none. Yeah.
Well, the Arizona Drains one, the same thing. The Arizona Drains recordings are so much better than the Document, the ones that came out on Document. Because that's the guy's name is Chris King. Chris King did the Arizona Drains ones. He's really good too. But these guys, they know how to get the sound out. I don't know how they do it, but it's night and day.
Yeah, it's some kind of magic,
Yeah, I did a liner notes for the box set, my Sam Cooke box set.
Oh wow!
That APCO put out. It's called Sam Cooke: The Complete Keen Years. It's all his Keen stuff from 1957, 1960. And while I was working on it, I was listening to the songs, and they're okay and everything like that. But then the engineer Terry Landy, she sent me the final mixes that she had done, and oh my God, they just sound so great.
Wow!
I really that's a really good set, because the thing about Sam Cooke is that his great stuff is great, but I think his bad stuff is even greater when he does songs that aren't the greatest songs.
Oh,
he can sing anything, that guy.
Wow. And so are there your liner notes for that anywhere near the tome of the Manzarine Dreams book?
No. Well, the Washington Phillips stuff that's about 15 years of research.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not continuously. I mean, I work on it like maybe 3 months, then I take 3 or 4 years off, then I work on another month. But the Sam Cooke box set was done in about 2.5 months, and I had Peter Gorelnik hanging over my head the whole time. I was trying to think of what can I find that he hasn't done already? Because he spent about 10 years. He spent about 10 years on his book on Sam Cooke, so you can't top that. So it's more, it's well written, but it's not as much research.
Sure.
The only thing I found that Gorelnik didn't have was that song "Old Man River."
Oh yeah.
By Oscar Hammerstein and
Rogers and Hammerstein.
Jerome Kern.
No.
But Jerome Kern, I think, wrote the music for that, and Hammerstein wrote the lyrics. But there's a part in "A Change Is Going to Come," the posthumous civil rights anthem that Sam Cooke wrote. It came out in '64, and it says, "I'm tired of living, but I'm scared of dying." It's one of the lyrics, and that's right from Old Man River.
Right.
He took the lyrics right from that.
Oh, wow.
And then you go back and you look. He's got "A Change Is Going to Come." It's got a river motif. It talks about the river running, and I think that when he did "Old Man River," a lot of this stuff was kind of stayed in his songwriting DNA, and kind of got him. That song is a pretty amazing song. You can analyze "Old Man River." It's just it's. I can't tell you exactly what it's about, but you can analyze it different ways, and it's kind of like how life keeps going on, even though these people are going, horrible things are happening to these people, and nobody cares.
Right.
That's on the one side, but then the other side is kind of like the river really is the people. That they will eventually succumb, not succumb. The other word, the opposite of that, persevere.
Yeah, persevere, rise. Yeah.
But that's really the only thing that I really got that was original. Whereas in the Washington Phillips thing, pretty much everything I got was original. I mean, they call it primary research when you aren't just recapitulating what other people have found. You're actually finding new things.
Yeah, going out and finding snuff bottles.
Yeah, a lot of people think I'm this great researcher because I found all this stuff. But to tell you the truth, the reason I was able to find all that stuff is because nobody really looked before.
Yeah.
Nobody cared. Even Blind Willie Johnson. How could you not? He's like the greatest slide guitar player of all time.
Yeah.
And he was 9 years. He recorded 9 years before Robert Johnson, and 2 years before Charlie Patton. And nobody really cares about Blind Willie Johnson, or didn't until recently,
right?
Because he's a gospel singer. Gospel really gets collectors are not into gospel. They care too much about the lyrics.
Right.
And they care too much about this is all about God. This is
Yeah, it makes them blush, maybe.
Yeah, but I'm not like that. I don't listen to any lyrics. I don't listen to Bob Dylan lyrics. I don't care about lyrics.
I'm the same way.
To me, the strength to me is if you have a really good melody and a good singer and all that stuff, the lyrics, it elevates the lyrics. You can have average lyrics, and when the presentation's so good that the lyrics sound great.
Right.
They have so much more meaning.
Right.
I don't care. So anyway, that's one of the reasons why I think that I was drawn to gospel music, is because I didn't care about the lyrics. I cared about the commitment of the musicians. And the other thing too is when I was working on the Blind Willie Johnson, I went and visited Mac McCormick. The greatest. What I'm trying to do, he's the greatest ever.
Yeah. He's an incredible researcher.
He's got so much stuff, that nobody even knows about. He's got a picture of Robert Johnson in a goddamn sailor suit.
Wow.
And I know a guy who's seen the picture, and he never even put it out there. Like, if I found something like that, I'd put it on Facebook.
Yeah. Is he still working on his book? Do you know if he's working on that?
No, he died.
Oh, that's right.
He died in 2015.
Right.
Oh, wow.
But I visited Mac McCormick, and he's a really weird guy. And first he was going to throw me out, I thought, because I mentioned another researcher that I thought he would be impressed by, that I knew him. and he hated the guy.
Oh wow, bad blood.
Why'd you mention it? Why'd you mention him? Oh shit, I screwed up on that one. Anyway, he finally calmed down. Had a couple drinks, and he was telling me about Blind Willie Johnson. He says, I don't know anything about gospel music, but to me, Blind Willie Johnson's more of a blues guy than a gospel guy. And then I told him about my research I did on Arizona Drains, that she was really the first Pentecostal recording artist. And he says, well, what makes a Pentecostal singer different than, say, a Baptist singer? At that point, I thought, well, this guy doesn't know anything about gospel music. If he's saying that,
Yeah.
And so when I drove back to Austin, I thought, well, I'm going to be a gospel historian, because Matt McCormick has already uncovered everything there is to uncover with the blues.
Right. Everybody
has it.
Yeah.
And nobody looks into gospel music. But, and also, to me, it's always been my favorite kind of music. Well, I say the last 25 years. When I used to party a lot, I'd smoke weed, get drunk every night, and the next morning I'd wake up and I'd see what was on the turntable. What did I play the last thing the night before? And it used to be like AC/DC or Black Sabbath or Metallica or something like that. Then later on it would be like, the Soul Stirrers, or the Swan Silvertones.
Right.
Yeah,
and
the antithesis.
Where do you go after? What's heavier than AC/DC? It's gospel music.
Yeah, it sure is.
Gospel music is so much heavier than AC/DC. And
it's
so
true.
Yeah, like
I
Homer
kind of like.
Quincy Smith or
I
something.
already had that get to me, like gospel. I already loved gospel music, but I didn't know anything about it, and so I spent the last. It's almost 20 years now, right? 2002.
Yeah, almost 20 years.
18 years, really. I got an assignment to do a gospel guidebook in 2002, and I spent a lot of time on that, and it never came out. I never got paid for it. Never came out, but that really got me going. I became infatuated with everything about gospel music.
I think
I wrote.
Oh, yeah. So the comparison you made between all the heavy metal and the gospel is the sort of singing preacher is also trying to scare you, but they mean it. Mm-hmm. It's not an act.
Yeah, it's all very sincere.
Well, it's the intensity of it all.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like, who is more intense than Blind Willie Johnson?
I can't think of anybody. Especially that.
So I think he's the first one. I think in my Ghost Notes book, I talk about he wasn't the first guy to ever play slide guitar on a record. You had Reverend Claiborne from Pittsburgh about 2 years earlier. Mm-hmm. Blind Willie Davis, played some slide.
Right. Yeah.
But when Blind Willie Johnson played slide, it's like he invented the dunk. He was like Dr. J. Like, remember in basketball, everybody's playing basketball. All of a sudden, Dr. J comes out. It's like, holy crap!
Yeah.
Uh-huh. And then after that, everybody wants to dunk all the time. Well, Blind Willie Johnson is the direct, link between Blind Willie Johnson and Jack White, Jimmy Page, Wayne Allman, Johnny Winter. Any slide guitar player you could think of, they all got their cue from Blind Willie Johnson.
Yeah. And now his music is floating out past the solar system. Maybe to be discovered by aliens someday, and it's going to freak their bean, It's going to totally blow their mind.
They should send some Washington Phillips music up there, because I bet if any extraterrestrials hear that, they're going to feel right at home. Yeah.
I'm sure they've already heard it, because that's one of the things too, is I try to get into Washington Phillips' mind, and I went to his house once, where his house was, and I sat out there. I was in my car for about an hour, because I was always afraid someone was going to shoot me. You always hear gunshots out there,
Oh wow.
People hunting, that sort of thing. But I sat in my car and I went out and I went to where his thing was, and I looked up in the sky and I thought, this is where he played.
Yeah.
He sat on this porch right here. This is what he saw.
Yeah.
And I swear, he could totally understand that he was really playing for the heavens.
Yeah.
He was really trying to reach the stars.
You can really hear those stars.
What are they doing in heaven today? Why, sin and sorrow are all done away. Peace it bound like the river, they say. What are they doing right now? I'm thinking of friends
Yeah, and like Dwight Willie Johnson's, his record's in a spacecraft that's going out outer space. I think Washington Phillips wanted, he wanted his music to go there naturally.
Yeah.
It's
through like psychic
celestial.
Yeah.
Celestial is the best way to describe the sound of his playing.
Yeah. Well, there's all sorts of descriptions that someone said it sounds like Heaven's ice cream truck, or God's ice cream truck, or something like that. Or the children's music box. But one of the quotes I had was Owen Ashworth. He's got an act. I don't know if it's called an act. He's a musician. He records under advanced bass.
Yeah.
And he did a whole
Casio
cover of Washington Phillips stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. He said the thing that gets him is it's such a effort to connect in that music. It's so true. Washington Phillips is trying so hard to connect. And it's loneliness, but it's also trying really hard. And there's another guy, his name is Aaron Blount. He had a band called Knife in the Water. And he was a really good person. He gave me a lot of stuff. I actually kind of stole something that he told me. And he said his music's simple, almost to the point of being psychedelic.
Yeah.
And I was like thinking, what? He's right. It's so simple.
Yeah.
It's almost like if you're a fan of J.J. Cale, the guitar player from Tulsa.
Mm-hmm. I am.
He plays so soft. His groove is so soft. His guitar is so soft, but it kicks ass like Kirk Hammett or something.
Right.
It's just like it blows your mind in a metal way, because it's so soft. And I think that's what I like when the musicians flip the dynamics, when they're not. It's not all about being loud and forceful and over amped up. It's also about connecting.
Right.
It's all about connecting.
Right. And that's the thing that kind of comes across, in all these artists you're mentioning, but especially with Washington Phillips, is like deep sincerity in what he's saying and what he's playing, and it's like immediate. I remember the first time I heard Washington Phillips, it like stopped me in my tracks because I'd never heard anything like that,
Right.
I was just going to say the first time I heard it, I stopped in my tracks because you were playing it.
That's right.
At your house.
Right.
And
Oh, really?
I completely lost my train of thought, forgot what I was doing, and I just had to sit down and soak it in.
Yeah, we were sitting around the table, and I just put it on the stereo, and it's incredible.
What song? What song was it?
I believe
you remember the first
was.
song you heard?
I think the first one I heard, I think, was "What Are We Doing in Heaven Today."
I walked in on "Train Your Child."
Yeah,
before
that's
I even
right.
heard him sing. I heard his voice speaking.
This lecture that God, Solomon says, train the child in the way that you should go, and when he gets old, he will not depart from it. Lots of people in the world, of course, you cannot blame them. God have given them children, and they don't know what to train them. When you educate an untrained child that's brought up full of sin, it's just only got sense enough to support your notes and go to the pen. Let us train our children and try to keep down so much sin, cause it'll be too late to cry when you see them going to the pen. Lots of those little womanish girls that think themselves to be grand, they will stand on the corners at night making dates with a married man. Those little mannish boys with a hat sitting on one strand of hair will go marry some woman's nice little girl and ain't got nowhere to carry her. Education is all right. I will tell you before you start. Before you educate the head, try to educate the heart.
for me, it was that song, A Mother's Last Word to Her Daughter.
Oh, man, that's a great one.
By and by, I'm going to see the King.
I was just singing it before we started this interview. Yeah, it's great.
By and by, I'm going to see the King. By and by, I'm going to see the King. Lord, I don't mind dying because I'm a child of God.
That's the one that really hooked me. And I discovered the music of Washington Phillips, Blind Willie Johnson, and Arizona Drains the same day.
Oh, wow.
I was a music critic for the Austin American Statesman.
Mm-hmm.
I get in the mail this CD. It's called Amazing Gospel. It was a kind of a knockoff, British, but they don't really get the rights. They just put out a CD and they don't care.
Right.
Who's gonna, they don't care about rights or anything like that.
Yeah, I've got a few of those.
Those three acts are the ones that really stood out to me, but I had no idea they were Texans. And then, one by one, I find out that Arizona Drains is from Texas, and Washington Phillips and Blind Willie Johnson.
And they all had these connections with each other,
Yeah, and they all there's only one song they all recorded, and that's By and By, I'm Going to See the King.
Yeah.
Through different titles. I mean, Washington Phillips called it that, Mother's Last Word to Her Daughter.
Right. And then the Carter family did that song too. I wouldn't mind dying. Or it's the same melody at least. I mean, they're different.
Some of the same lyrics as well. Yeah.
Well, Arizona Drains is the first one to do it. Yeah.
Blind Willie.
Yeah, I think Arizona Drains is the first one to record it.
Right.
No, Arizona Drains recorded first.
Right.
Oh, okay.
Right.
She was 1926. I think she wrote that song.
Wow.
Because when Blind Willie did, they said it was a cover of Arizona Drains. I got sore throat.
That's all right. You mentioned.
I'm in a dry throat.
You mentioned.
Been talking a lot. I'm sorry.
That's all right. No,
that's okay.
This is great.
You get me wound up on this.
Yeah, you mentioned that Washington Phillips definitely or probably knew Blind Lemon Jefferson, which I thought was really interesting. They used to play fish fries together.
Yeah, they were in a group together.
Wow.
And the way I found that out is that I was reading this Alan Governor had a book, I forget what it's called, but he interviewed a guy who was 106 years old.
Wow.
And the guy was saying he used to go see Blind Lemon Jefferson and play with Washington Phillips and his brothers, Tim and Doc. And nobody knew, there was nothing about Tim and Doc. Nobody ever did the research. Nobody ever looked at the census records, all the other stuff. And so when I found out that Washington Phillips had a brother named Tim and Doc, and then that quote was out there, that's got to be real.
Yeah.
There's no way this guy could have made up Tim and Doc.
Yeah.
So, but they're from they're both from Freestone County, and if you were a great musician in a county, small county in Texas, word got around.
Right.
People knew who you were. Blind Lemon Jefferson is one of those guys that's so important. Him and Blind Willie Johnson used to compete against each other in Hearn, Texas, according to this guy named Adam Booker.
Mm-hmm.
They play at different street corners, and I could totally see that. It was just the way you made money. If you were blind, the way you made money was either as a beggar or a musician.
Right.
That was it.
Yeah.
And so these guys, and Washington Phillips wasn't blind, but he was on a farm by himself, and he'd probably play 12 hours a day.
Right.
The kid said he would always be playing in his mule cart.
Yeah.
He'd have his zithers up there and play, and they said he wouldn't even have to use the reins.
Right.
The donkeys would just go on their own.
And he'd be selling his plums and his oils and herbal remedies and whatnot.
It's weird too because three different people told me that he smelled like liniment oil. He had that real heavy. He used to oil his. He was real black. And he used to just put all this oil on him. And it's kind of weird that people remembered that about him. And he's kind of a mystic too. He sold herbal remedies.
Right. That was a
And,
detail that was really striking to me, is that he was covered in liniment oil, like he's anointing himself, or just keeping moisturized, I guess, is the other part of it, you know.
Sure.
I mean, he was a small town Texas eccentric, you know.
Right.
One with a lot of talent.
Yeah.
And what I was trying to do too with I was trying to figure out, like, how did he get this idea to play music that way? Like, what?
Yeah.
You know, just he seemed to be fully formed out of nowhere.
I'm thinking it was the stars. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it could have been, but I found out that his grandfather was from Kentucky,
Mm-hmm.
and they had a lot of camp meetings in the early 1800s. I think it was called the Great Awakening, and that's when black people started going to church services for the first time. And
right.
You know, Washington Phillips, he's got a little bit of the Appalachian kind of instrumentation to his music. So I think maybe his grandfather might have been a musician, and that's where he got it from.
Yeah, that would make a lot of sense, because it does seem to, you listen to other artists from that region of Texas, and he's definitely doing something, unique, and it seems
nobody sounds like him. Nobody sounds like him, either before or since.
Yeah,
you know,
there's nothing else like
so
it.
He came up the whole thing himself, and was a total virtuoso. It wasn't just that he had an instrument that he made himself that nobody had heard before. Nobody can duplicate to this day. They know about it. People are playing zithers 30, 40 years. They can't do what he did.
No, with two hands, doing accompaniment and the melody. It's psychedelic is a good word. You know, it's incredible.
Yeah, nobody can come close. Nobody comes close to what he did. And then also singing on top of that.
Yeah.
No overdubs. You know, no overdubs, let's do another take.
That's the other incredible thing about that weekend with Frank B. Walker, is those are first takes that you're hearing. Like, that's
single takes.
That's the first thing he's hearing. That's the first thing you're hearing. Yeah.
No, I will say there were two takes. They did two takes of most songs, but they only used the first take on almost every occasion.
Right.
Like they on the recording. If you look in the book on the Washington, it'll say sometimes it'll have two takes. It'll say first take. And it'll say use this one,
right?
You know, next to it. So I think they would go through two, but when they made the record, they actually had to burn it into an actual record. You know. Yeah. So it was not. They didn't want to use too many of those records.
Yeah, it was straight to lacquer, right? Probably.
Right.
And it was a brand new process, because it was acoustic recording before, you know, and then. I can't remember the name.
Electrical.
Yeah, it was the first electrical recordings. Yeah.
Viva Tonal.
Viva Tonal. That
it actually started. Yeah, and Frank B. Walker had used it once before, I think in New Orleans. So he was fairly new to it.
Yeah.
You know? And that's why I think, like, I tried really hard to find out. I would give anything to find out where those records were made.
Yeah.
You know, Blind Willie Johnson, Washington Phillips, Lillian Glenn. Coley Jones, all these incredible musicians.
Oh yeah, Coley Jones.
Where did they all do this? Where was that first weekend? Where was it? And I've been looking all over, never found any evidence. And so I finally figured out. Well, I didn't figure out. I just guessed that Columbia Records had three storefronts next to each other.
Mm-hmm.
So there were 2000, 2002, 2004 North Lamar Boulevard.
Yeah.
And so I kind of figured that's probably where they did it, because they had they had the new electronic system. They had three storefronts. They had plenty of room, and it was in a neighborhood that blacks had access to. You know, bordering a black neighborhood.
Right.
So I kind of figured that was probably it, but it doesn't matter. That building's been torn down anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, it's amazing. It's amazing all the stuff that's been lost.
Yeah,
it really is.
But it's incredible that it ever happened in the first place, because there was a boom with race records, you know, like there was some sort of like niche market, or like, you know, capitalistic imperative to like get in on this market, and in the process of doing that, like, documented all this music that might have been lost forever.
Well, you know, the first 4 years of recording blues recordings, almost all the records were women. The singers were women.
Right.
Because Mamie Smith had the first hit, right, 1920. This is like the 100th anniversary of Mamie Smith.
I can't sleep at night. I can't eat a bite.
really the 100th anniversary of the black recording industry, and they didn't think that blacks would buy records because records were 75 cents each.
Right.
And
Which
then
is not
Mamie
a small
Smith comes
amount of
out.
money.
It's $9 today.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's like going to pay $9 for a 45 today.
Yeah.
But anyway, so but it was a magical thing to be able to have music in your own home. It's nowadays we take it for granted, but back then it was kind of like you've got something special here.
Right.
But she sold about more than 500,000, and it turns out that black people actually bought records at a greater frequency than whites. They had moved to the cities during World War I for jobs, and so you had this whole urban migration of blacks to the cities, and then Mamie Smith hits hard, and for the first Bessie Smith, Ma Rainey, Sippy Wallace, Ida Cox, Victoria Spivey, it was almost all women at first. And in fact, there was a guy in Papa Charlie Jackson in 1924. He advertised himself as being as good as a woman.
Wow.
Which nowadays it's totally flipped. Nowadays it's sort of like men are have the superior edge.
Right.
When it comes to blues.
That's incredible. Yeah, I wonder why that is that women were the first forebearers or whatever.
Because Mamie Smith had the hit, so they wanted to copy it.
I guess, yeah, makes sense, yeah.
Yeah, so they thought that's what they want, and it was selling all the. In fact, there was like 4 Smiths. There was Clara Smith, there was Sarah Smith, all these women. They all had these hits, and it was all the same sort of. There was a piano and a woman singing, and then really the Blind Lemon Jefferson's the one who changed all that, though.
Right.
In 1926, he did Lonesome Blues. I can't remember what it's called now.
That's not, yeah.
And Black Snake Moan and all this stuff.
Yep.
In 1926, then all of a sudden everybody wanted a guitar. The women with the pianos is over with. Now it's all guitar. It's all country blues.
Yeah, like Yeshi Wiley and L.V. Thomas as well.
Yeah. They were 1928, right? 29?
I think so, yeah. And, I'm trying to remember from things I've read, because they were playing fish fries in that same area at the same time. I wonder if they had any interactions with Washington Phillips or Blind Lemon Jefferson or Blind Willie Johnson.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they did because they were all chasing money.
Right.
It was a living. It wasn't a way of life.
Right.
Yeah.
They had to make money. They had to feed themselves and feed their families, and that's why that was the impetus for playing music in the beginning. It wasn't an art at all. It was just you got to make money.
Yeah, exactly.
So they would go to whatever it took. They would go to the towns when the cotton came in, and then all the workers had money, and they would go to the towns and that whole adage about the night people's job is to take the day people's money.
Yeah, it's that's a circle of life, as they say.
You can see like in Marlin, where Blind Willie is kind of known as, for Marlin, you could see the setup. You could actually see exactly what street corners the musicians played at. It seemed to be made for that sort of thing.
Right.
These warehouses were in kind of a boardwalk, wooden sidewalks out there. And when they did the movie Leadbelly, I think in 1976 with Roger Mosley, they used Marlin as Shreveport. What's the street called? Fannin Street. So Marlin in the 70s was like Shreveport in the 20s.
Wow.
It's an interesting town. If you ever come to Texas, I would suggest going to Marlin.
I might. My dad lives out in Texas, so maybe next time I'm out there, I'll go check it out.
Yeah, I've been known to go in Texas once in a while. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one thing. That's one of the perks. One of the perks of what I do is that I also love to drive to small towns and find the places to eat and where are the weird used stores. You know, like that's the other thing too. When I went to the Washington Phillips, when I went to Teague, they had the best junk store you've ever seen. I mean, it was so full of junk.
Wow.
It went on forever, and the guy who owned it, his father used to deal with Washington Phillips. He used to buy hogs from him.
Wow.
And go to Dallas and sell them. And he had all kinds of stories. And that was when I was there. I went to the junk store. I went, oh my God, I'm going to find that manzarine in this goddamn junk store. It's in here somewhere. I spent like 7 hours, and I found anything that looked like an instrument I bought. You know.
Sure.
It was pretty cheap. But they had some weird stuff, but no manzarine. That would have been a fine, though.
Michael, you got to find that manzarine.
I got the snuff bottle, but I'd rather have the manzarine.
Yeah, right? Wow. I wonder where that ended up, you know? I have no idea where it could...
You know, who knows? Maybe someone will turn up, but that's the thing. You always have that daydream when you start off working on a story, that you're going to find a box full of posters and letters and a guitar neck and, you know, something else. You never give. You end up driving for 6 hours and you find an address in the city directory, and you drive back home, and that's enough. That's enough, because even if you find nothing, that's something. Yeah. You at least looked under that rock, you know.
Yeah.
And I spent a lot of time. It seems futile, but it's not. It's not. It's just like, okay, I'm done with that. I've done that one. Now I got to do this one.
Right.
Yeah, you got to do what you got to do. I'm so glad you do what you do, Michael.
Yeah, I think that really shows in the book, you know, like, nobody else is doing this kind of research, you know, and it's very valuable, you know, because time is running out with a lot of these folks who knew these people, and it's imperative to do, I think, you know, to document these really important artists.
And I think that urgency really comes through in your writing.
Well, and you have to be willing to talk to old people and listen to a lot of bullshit.
Yeah.
You know, to get the good stuff.
Right.
That's the thing, is you got to knock on doors, and you can't just be on your computer. You got to go out there and, you know, go to these. I mean, the most boring places in the world are court. What do you call the court? Not the little offices at the bottom of the courtyard where you find the deeds and all that other stuff. The county clerk's office can be so boring, but if you're doing research, it's the most exciting place in the world. You know,
right?
Because that's where you're gonna find the good stuff.
Right, like who Washington Phillips actually was. You know, he didn't pass away in an insane asylum.
Well, to me that was important, because there was a real mythology about him.
Right.
You know, so
that he was like,
that's why it worked out.
Like, he was a weird guy from all the people you've interviewed, but he wasn't that guy. He wasn't
clinically insane.
Yeah, or
right.
Like this tormented. From all I've read, you know, he doesn't seem like a tormented figure or something like that. He seems like a
funny uncle.
Yeah, a funny uncle, or an eccentric member of the community, and a beloved member of the community who was like very involved in Sunday services. And you mentioned he sang "There Is a Fountain Filled with Blood," which I'd love to hear some of his other songs. You mentioned that he did secular songs at these fish fries, you know, but he didn't record those ones because, I think
because he was a gospel artist.
Yeah, and those were the more important songs to get out for him, you know.
That was a hardcore rule back then. You did not do both. You chose either gospel or blues.
Right, and he chose.
And it's weird too, because his biggest hit has blues in the title too.
Oh, yeah, true.
Blues.
Yeah.
Every man don't understand the Bible alike, but that's all now. I tell you that's all. But you better have Jesus. I tell you that's all. Well, denominations has no right to fight. They ought to just treat each other right, and that's all. I tell you that's all.
It's not really. I don't think it's a blues song. It's, It's interesting, that song, too, that Sister Rosetta Tharpe recorded that one.
Right.
That's all.
She called it That's All.
Do you think
You
she
play
had
music?
the
You play music on the show?
Yeah, we do.
Huh?
Yeah, we'll be dropping in songs throughout.
Yeah, play that Sister Rosetta Tharpe doing her version of Denomination Blues.
And here it is.
Called That's All.
It's playing right now.
I think that's the first time she ever played electric guitar on a record, was when she was on That's All. But if you have the electric version, there's two versions. One, she's playing acoustic guitar, then she plays electric guitar, I think, in 1941.
We'll play the electric.
She's a great artist, though.
She sure is.
Yeah.
Also, another one of those first rock and roll artists, that really sort of typified the form,
Yeah.
I wonder how she heard, like a lot of those earlier stuff. I wonder how people came across Washington Phillips, Yeah, especially with like Sister Rosetta Tharpe before there were any reissues or anything like that.
Well, she was the church, she was in the church, and Washington Phillips was probably, pretty well known. His music was probably well known in the church.
Right.
I don't know. It's just probably one of those songs that people sang.
Yeah.
And she picked up on. It's not an exact cover. It's just she
Right.
kind of uses just parts of it.
Right.
But enough that's all is the hook, and that's all the hook in the Denomination Blues too.
It's
Right.
true. Yeah. She's the skeleton and some of the meat.
Yeah. Hey, what town are you guys in? You're in Seattle?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're in Olympia, so yeah.
It is.
7:33.
Oh, Olympia's a cool town.
It sure is.
I like Olympia a lot.
Yeah, it's a great music town. We're right here in downtown, looking out on 4th Avenue, if you know where that is.
Sort of the main
You
drag.
know what I really like there is that place, that VFW hall that's downtown.
Oh yeah, the Eagles Hall.
Hey,
Oh.
Miles?
Oh, just a minute. Oh gosh, sorry. I just hung up on the guy we're interviewing. We're just wrapping it up.
Hey, Lonnie.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay.
Hi. Camille wants to know what your favorite color is, Miles.
Green.
He says green. Okay, she's making you a Valentine. All right, cool. Yeah, call the guy back and then call me back.
Okay.
Bye.
Oh gosh, I was trying. I hit the wrong button.
Yeah, and went to hold and ended the call.
Hey, Phyllis.
Hey, sorry about that.
Hey,
My wife was calling in, and I was trying to end that call, and I wound up hanging up on you instead. So.
I hear you now. That's all right. Well, you probably have enough anyway, right?
Yeah, I think so. Michael, thank you so much for talking to us tonight, and I wanted to know.
Thanks for caring,
Oh yeah, I think there's probably a lot of people that will be very intrigued to hear what you have to say on this subject. And I was wondering if you want to plug your upcoming book, Ghost Notes.
Okay. Well, it's called Ghost Notes, Pioneering Spirits of Texas Music. And it's got, I have all my research on Washington Phillips, Arizona Drains, and Blind Willie Johnson is in the book, but it's recontextualized and kind of weaves together instead of separately. And I kind of retrace the beginnings of the black recording industry. Mm-hmm. And then I have a really cool chapter on Amos Milburn and Charles Brown, the two piano players from the Houston area. Mm-hmm. They were really huge in the late 40s, early 50s. They're the biggest R&B artists. And I found out that they were actually a couple. They were a romantic couple.
Oh, wow.
And
how did you come across that?
Yeah,
I mean, I'm sure it's in the book, and feel free to not spoil anything. But that's a pretty incredible find.
No, I had like three sources. Well, I had to piece all these things together, but I kept reading these interviews that, and one of them I got I was at a record convention, and I told a guy I was into Amos Milburn. He says, well, I interviewed him right before he died. And I said, really? Do you have a tape or something like that? He goes, yeah. And he sent me a CD with the interview of it. And it was like Amos Milburn was talking about, like, me and Charles, we lived in the same hotel room. So he went to one side to write this song, and I went to the other side to write this song. And then Charles Brown was talking about, they were roommates in New Orleans, and they were always roommates. And then I read somewhere that in R.J. Smith's book that Charles Brown was gay, and his wife complained that on the road he'd always keep a separate room for his boys. There's guys, and he'd be with her, and after about a year they broke up.
Wow.
And then I read this other interview with Amos Milburn's band leader, Texas Johnny Brown, and he's telling Alan Governor, well, Amos was gay, but he was cool. And so I just thought, well, these guys are living together, and they're both gay.
Right.
And I need to have someone confirm it. So I called Charles Brown's manager, Hal Beagle, this great guy. Passed away recently, but he started the R&B Foundation and raised a lot of money for R&B artists that were kind of getting ripped off by the labels.
Mm-hmm.
And so I called him up, and I was just talking to him. He goes, yeah, they were a couple.
Wow.
I didn't even ask him. I just saying like that. Oh, really? He told me what it was, this and that. So then I talked to Charles Brown's band leader, Danny Caron, and he goes, yeah, they lived together for like 4 years in Cincinnati. Wow. So anyway, the only reason, I love them for their music. I didn't do the story just because they were gay.
Right, but
if
that's the story,
it works in with their, well, it works in with their how they kind of became obscure really fast. Right. And then the one thing I ended with is, like, for a while there, though, they were the most talented couple in America.
Wow.
When you think about it.
Yeah.
It's like a lot more talented than Steve and Edie or whatever.
Yeah, or Sonny and Cher.
Amos Milburn is the first great rock and roll piano player, just exceptional piano player. And Charles Brown is the guy that Ray Charles modeled his whole career after.
Wow.
So these two guys are real significant. Anyway, that's in the book. I have like maybe 30 subjects. I have Rocky Erickson, a chapter on him.
Oh, that's great.
A chapter on Jimmy Bowen. Who else? Sippy Wallace, and the birth of Boogie Woogie Piano.
There you go.
I had a book before that called All Over the Map: True Heroes of Texas Music. This is a sequel to that, but I wanted it to look different and feel different. So it's in a different way. Just the chapters aren't separated as much. They kind of blend together.
Right.
Plus, there's this great musician artist named Tim Kerr. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you've heard of him.
I don't think so. I haven't.
No, I don't know Tim Kerr.
He was in Poison 13, The Big Boys. There's a record label.
That sounds familiar. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a kind of a Texas music legend, but he's been doing this really great painting portraits of mostly African Americans and civil rights people, and he uses colors really, really great. And so he did all the art for the book.
Wow.
Which is good. I mean, the worst thing about if you write a book like this, the worst thing is trying to get clearance for all the pictures.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
That's a nightmare.
Wow. When can we look forward to this book?
It comes out. We have a book release party at South by Southwest on March 21st.
Great.
You guys coming in? You guys aren't coming in for that, are you?
I don't think so.
I don't reckon so. No.
It's too far.
It's too far and it's too crazy.
It's too crazy.
I'd stay away.
I've been to South by Southwest a few times.
People on Segways and wearing Google glasses or something. I don't know.
Yeah. Once it had the interactive, when it was just music, it was cool.
Yeah, I never got to go back then.
It was a great festival until about 1999.
Yeah, when all the tech folks started moving in.
Yeah, tech folks, and also kind of like the hip hop sort of taking over. And more, big parties with, I don't know.
Yeah,
right.
All the corporate parties.
But now it's sort of like you can't really get as much work done because it's so hard to get around. But I'm doing so we're doing Ghost Notes. The release is at a cemetery.
Oh wow!
Oakwood Cemetery. It's a chapel and cemetery, and it's the same cemetery where the Lomaxes are buried.
Wow! When's that going to be happening?
It's Saturday, March 21st, and we're getting a bunch of local awesome musicians and also musicians coming to town for South by Southwest. I'm going to sing songs around the grave sites of the Lomaxes.
Wow.
In the afternoon.
Oh,
Just whoever wants to. I mean, if you're from Ireland or England and, you're into folk music, you want to visit the thing, why not do a song, So
Yeah.
we have a videographer. We had a videographer there that's going to record, and it should be pretty cool.
Yeah.
That sounds great. Well, yeah, if you're anywhere near the Austin area or headed that way, as I'm sure many of our musician listeners are, that sounds like a really fun thing to check out.
Yeah,
and
come on out.
pick up a copy of Michael's new book.
Yep. Ghost Notes.
Yeah, Ghost
Hey, thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah,
I
thanks
really
for talking
appreciate
to
it.
us,
Thanks,
Michael.
That was really
right.
great talking to you.
All
All
right.
right, cool, man.
Thanks a lot.
Great. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.